We're going to continue our relationship series, looking at a beautiful marriage. So very much a two-parter with Wendy's last week on single and thriving. So as Anna said, do check that one out if you hadn't heard it, weren't there. I'm going to be reading from John's Gospel, John chapter 4. So if you have a Bible with you, please do turn to it. But the words will come up behind me. And as I said, I want to unpack a beautiful marriage, both the practical outworking of it a little bit at the end, but probably more really getting into what actually is it? What is a beautiful marriage? Let me read. John 4 and verse 7. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock." Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water, welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water." Jesus meets a woman at the well in the middle of the day, which is obviously the hottest part. Is quite unusual. Most of the men and women would have gone in the morning when it was much cooler, and she was thirsty, literally needed a drink, went to the well. But in another sense, she was relationally thirsty. She wasn't with anybody else. It was quite unusual in that society to go to a well on your own as a woman. As I said, you would have gone in the morning when it was cooler. We're supposed to infer into the context that she was alone. She was isolated. She didn't have a community particularly, certainly no one to go with to the well. And as we will see in a little moment when we read a bit further, some of her sexual history comes out when she talks to Jesus, that there's a good chance she was ostracized within her community, that she was looked down upon because of some of the decisions and choices that she'd made in life. She was a woman, if you saw it in both senses, she was thirsty for a drink of water, but thirsty for relationship, for love, for intimacy, for connection. She was all on her own in the middle of the day trying to collect water from the well. And Jesus engages her in conversation. So in verse 7, where we began, it says, "Give me a drink." But it's not a command. It's very much a question. He's inviting her into a dialogue. "Please, will you draw me some water so that I can have a drink?" Jesus breaks all kinds of barriers in making that request. As we were told as we read through, Jews don't tend to associate with Samaritans. It was an unusual thing for Jesus, a Jewish rabbi, with his disciples to go through Samaria in the first place. He then is on his own with a woman. It was very unusual for a man to speak to an unknown woman in that society. And Jesus, being a rabbi, was a moral, upstanding member of the community. This was in some ways, a disreputable woman. Jesus treats her with love and dignity and respect. And he asks her, "Will you draw me some water for a drink?" And he makes her, as they engage in this conversation, an astonishing offer in verse 9 and 10. The Samaritan woman said to him, as we've just seen, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria?" And Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." So there's a gift. God wants to give you a gift, something called living water, and all you have to do is ask, and you can have it. Standing in probably some quite arid countryside in the middle of the day. This woman was very, very thirsty. When Jesus offers living water, it was going to be something she was deeply interested in. Because when I say to you, Jesus offers you all this morning some living water, most of our responses, if we don't think about it from the spiritual dimension, will think, well, that's very nice, but I can literally just go into the canteen and get some water. I have water everywhere. If I can't get it, somebody runs out, I'll just go to the shops. When Jesus offers this to this woman, it was a powerful invitation. For her, water is life and death. To have your thirst quenched was a big deal in this society. When she meets Jesus and he says, I have some living water, when she's interested, we need to understand why. In this kind of first century context, this was a serious offer. Living water. And as she is intrigued, Jesus continues in verse 13. He said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. A huge claim from a man that she has just met. He's saying normal water, if you come to this well, if you get yourself something to drink, you will drink it. You'll be thirsty again. You'll be back here tomorrow. You have to go again and again. Jesus says, I'm offering you some living water. If you ask for it, you will never be thirsty again. Just think about that as an offer for a woman whose whole life is on going to the well in the middle of the day and I don't have enough to drink. It's outrageous. She might not understand really what she's been offering. We might not really understand what is this living water at this point. But for someone who's thirsty, it is quite incredible. Jesus is offering ultimate water, no more thirst. An internal spring, not just a well, an internal spring that will flow over and over. A spring as in it keeps going. The water keeps coming. You can keep drinking it, but the spring keeps producing. And just to help us understand what Jesus is really offering this woman, he is saying that there is a thirst in all of us that affects us all. Not just a thirst for a drink, but an internal, inner search for love, happiness, meaning, etc. And that Jesus is the answer. Water is just analogous. There's a deep inner thirst in our souls. And Jesus is saying, I've got some living water to meet that need. A thirst that he claims he alone can satisfy. That's what he's offering. That's what he's saying to this woman. One of the wealthiest Americans, I think, ever, I don't know how they calculate these things, but they put it into modern terms, was someone called John D. Rockefeller, who I looked up, and it turns out he controlled about 90% of the oil in America in the 19th century. Pretty wealthy guy. And someone asked him, in terms of his wealth, how much is enough? Bearing in mind, he was the wealthiest man on the planet at the time. And his answer was, just a little bit more. How much wealth is enough? Just a little bit more. And people at the time, and maybe even as I quote it to you now, kind of, you roll your eyes a little bit. You think, if you're that, well, you're a business magnate, how much is enough? Well, just a little bit more. Think, come on, John D. Rockefeller. But Jesus' point and his invitation here is that we are all the same. That in every single one of us there is a thirst for something. How much is enough? Just a little bit more. Whether it's like, my longing is for intimacy. How much is enough? Just a little bit more than I've got. Whether it's for security or finance or love or friendship or family or whatever the thing is that we have, how much is enough? Just a little bit more. And Jesus is saying to this woman, and he's saying to us, there is not enough of whatever that thing is in the world to satisfy. If the thing is, I just crave intimacy, there is not enough connection in the world to meet that need in your heart. If your thing is status and approval, there are not enough likes on Facebook to satisfy that longing. Whatever it is, Jesus is saying there's not enough of it. It's why when people get success in life, it so often leads to boredom and restlessness. If you look at the people in our society that so-called made it to the top, or I was trying to think of people like Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos at Amazon, being a success in their business is seldom enough. We'll just stop there. I've done it. It's like, let's start a space program. That's obviously what we need to do next. Or maybe in a good way, let's find some humanitarian crises that we can do something about. That's good. There are not enough causes in the world, though, to satisfy the longing in someone's heart. Whatever the thing is, we always need a little bit more. C.S. Lewis famously wrote in Mere Christianity, if we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. This is a human condition. Every single one of us in this room should identify with this to some extent. Think, now, there's something I am missing and I am lacking. And Jesus says he has come to provide our souls with something from another world. Quite a claim. And he offers it to this woman, even though she probably doesn't really understand it at this point in the story. Here's some living water. But he offers it to us. Whatever your heart is longing for this morning, Jesus has living water that he wants to give to you. And if we just carry on in our passage for a moment, verse 16, Jesus carries on with this woman. He says to her, "Go, call your husband and come here." And the woman answered him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You are right in saying, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you have now is not your husband. What you have said is true." This, Wendy last week in her message talking about conversational cul-de-sacs, where you ask a question and you're like, I don't know where to go with this now. And we think, Jesus, you've just stumbled into a conversational cul-de-sac by asking about this lady's husband. A bit awkward. Jesus is not being cruel. He is not mistakenly thought, oh no, I was hoping you'd bring a husband. Turns out you've got 5. He has prophetic insight into her life. He knows what the answer to this question will be. But he asks her out of love, because he's trying to show her where she's putting her trust all these years. He's trying to get specific about where she's thirsty internally and where his living water is really going to make a powerful difference. He asks her to call her husband, and she says, I've had 5 husbands, and Jesus knows this, but it's where she's been trying to meet her deepest longings. Each time, presumably, in her life, she thought to herself, maybe this one is the one. 5 times. Maybe this is the man for me. And we have to remember in this society, it was almost certainly that the men divorced women. So almost certainly she would have been divorced 5 times. Yeah, you imagine the crushing heartbreak of having to go through that 5 times, of being told you're not enough, it's over, we're done, moving on. 5 times she had endured that. And the man still that she was with was not her husband, and she was still going. And when you kind of put the 2 things together, that she has a need, she's looking for something. Jesus saying, I'm here to provide living water. He's trying to bring out into the open her deep need of, I want to be loved. I want connection. I want somebody to love me and to care for me and to look after me and whatever else. And the fact that she's been divorced 5 times, you begin to wonder what has been going on in her life. What are some of the struggles she must have been enduring? And potentially, her strong desire for love and affection and affirmation maybe had actually been putting pressure on those marriages. Might be part of the reason that they broke down. Sam Albury, a pastor and theologian, commenting on this passage, I'm just going to quote him. He says, if we marry someone thinking this will fulfill us, we won't be easy to live with. If we expect another human being to fill that amount of purpose and meaning in our lives, it will easily place an unbearable burden on them. We don't know for sure that's what's going on. I'm trying to put myself into her shoes, the fact that she's been married this number of times. But where she has been looking, I think, for whatever it is, love, affection, affirmation, surely has been putting a huge pressure on her relationships. Imagine what life was like for her. The fear of not another divorce. Maybe the jealousy, paranoid, resentful, any kind of perceived lack of affection, something to wrestle with. Again, we're not told. This is definitely Steve trying to put himself into her shoes. But I'm trying to think Jesus is about to change this woman's life. He is meeting a real need, a real struggle, a real battle that has been going on with her. Perhaps it wasn't just that she wasn't enough, because that's the obvious, the first thing it says is she's been divorced 5 times. That's hard. But also maybe these men were not enough for her. You see both sides? She was rejected, but also they weren't enough for her. They weren't meeting that deepest longing. She essentially, I think, has been looking for 2 things all her life. Somebody to meet her needs and somebody who wouldn't be crushed by the weight of them. And according to Jesus, that person is standing right in front of her. The person that she has been longing for all her life is finally there. God has a gift to give her, living water. The answer to a whole life of fruitless searching and heartbreak. That she, this woman, can be fully known and fully loved. In almost any human relationship, it feels like it's always a fight between those 2 things. So I can be fully honest and open and transparent. I'm going to lay all of my faults and foibles, I'm going to lay it all out there. The fear is I won't be loved in return. People will see I'm too broken. So the alternative is, I'll rein it in a bit. I'll, put on a nice image, I won't be truly known, but I will be loved. You find that in any relationship, there's a battle between how honest and open and transparent about all of the mess, but I really want to be loved. Jesus is saying, with me, you can have both. Fully known, fully open, warts and all, and I love you, and I'll choose you, and I have a gift for you. It's an astounding offer. We don't necessarily realize it as we read through the passage, but Jesus' offer is extraordinary. He is making sense of her life. I think it was Owen maybe prayed, God knows me more than I know myself. Jesus knows this woman more than she knows herself. He is drawing her out. And it's a little bit subtle, but I think it always is in John's Gospel, that the number 7 is very significant. There's 7 I am sayings in John, for example, and 7 is the number of creation was done in 7 days, etc., etc. And this woman says, I've had 5 husbands. The man I am currently with is not my husband. Jesus is the 7th man in her life. I appreciate it's subtle. But I said, the more you dig into John, the more you see these patterns all the way through it. Jesus is saying, I am the husband you've been waiting for. I'm the true husband, the bridegroom, the one that she has been waiting for. And he promises her that if she chooses him, she will never be thirsty ever again, in the most profound way. And if you read to the end of the story, you get to the end of Jesus' life, when he went to the cross, he became thirsty. I can't remember who it was or if they're named, but someone takes a stick and a sponge and they dip it in wine vinegar and they lift it to him. He says, I'm thirsty. And he sips and he doesn't drink anymore. And the point is, Jesus is spiritually cut off from the Father. he is spiritually thirsty. He is spiritually barren on the cross so that he might come and meet our thirst, so that he might come and quench our deepest needs, our deepest longings. Jesus goes to the cross to rescue us. He is the bridegroom we've been waiting for. And then at the kind of the end of the story, the passage, verse 28 and 29, so it says, "So the woman left her water jar and went away into town and said to the people, 'Come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ?'" She came thirsty. She doesn't get any water. She leaves her jar and she runs back to Samaria to tell everybody about a man who just changed her life. So, could this be the Christ? He's unlike anyone I have ever met. You have to come and meet him. You have to come and encounter him for yourself. Jesus has this remarkable encounter with her where she's no longer thirsty. Now, I realize I've done a lot there and I haven't really started talking about beautiful marriage. But I wanted to lay that foundation so that we can have a much better understanding of what marriage really is and what we're really going after. Because what we should get and glean from this is that marriage, or for that matter, any other relationship, will never be enough to quench our thirst, our deep thirst. That marriage, therefore, and Wendy said this last week, is not the goal of the Christian life. Jesus is the goal. He is the one that we need. He is the one who will quench our thirst. And so my first application probably is maybe for some married couples in the room, to lay down any expectations that your spouse will never, ever be able to meet. Or maybe even for a single person, you think, if I get married, then I'm going to be fine. Your spouse will never be able to meet things that only Jesus can give. That marriage is a beautiful gift, and I'm going to finish in a moment with some things about why it's beautiful and how we should go after it. But only Jesus gives things like true intimacy, security, meaning, value, love, connection. We have to primarily get it from him first. It's okay, in other words, because I don't know, I'm not speaking to anybody's marriage in particular, I'm just going to throw out a few things. If you think, my spouse is not my best friend, that's okay. Jesus is the one you need to pursue with all your heart. I think again, in marriage, my sex life is boring and average. That's okay, because Jesus is the only one who can fulfill you. My communication in marriage is hard and average and difficult. That's okay, because Jesus is the one you're going after. And as I was preparing this and praying for this, I was like, I don't know if I should just throw it out there. I don't know how that's going to land. I don't know if people are like, what? I'm not saying we shouldn't fight for our marriages. I'm not saying we shouldn't pursue good things and healthy things and want things to be better. But I am saying we have to go for Jesus first. First. Because if we do, it releases all the pressure in our marriage. If we grasp this truth, I believe our earthly marriages will be transformed because they will no longer need to carry the load of meeting our deepest needs. Does that make sense? If we go to Jesus, he alone is our foundation, our satisfaction. Yes, we want to have healthy marriages, but they're built on him. And also, I think, hopefully this will be a very, very helpful word for anyone who's been divorced. That marriage doesn't define you. Jesus defines you. That he encounters a woman who has been divorced 5 times. It doesn't say, well, you can't be in my kingdom. He says, no, I have living water, ready and available for you. That this is a message of hope for everybody. Jesus is always enough. But then, kind of in terms of application, secondly and finally, when we understand who Jesus is and what he calls us to in marriage, there's lots of us in the room that should take marriage way more seriously. So I know I'm giving you contradictory advice here, but I'm going for it. Jesus is the true bridegroom. He's the seventh husband. He's the one this woman has been waiting for. Paul says something very similar, but in a different way in Ephesians. So in chapter 5 of Ephesians, verse 32, he's talking about marriage between a man and a woman. And he says, this mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. So there's something profound about marriage that is bigger than just the couple. It speaks about a big reality, Christ and the church. And if you've been to a wedding, not always a Christian wedding, but particularly at Christian weddings, the weddings are often choreographed to tell the bigger story, which again, some of you might be fully aware of this, others it might be a little bit new, I don't know. But if you've been to a wedding, the groom normally stands at the front waiting very nervously, pacing around. But in theory, he should know he's already won his bride. She just has to turn up. It's a bad wedding when he's not sure and he's really hoping that she makes it. He should know she's already won. She's just getting ready. And that when she arrives, everyone stops looking at the groom and turns to look at the bride, which is right and appropriate. Everyone's like, I can't wait to see her. All the bridesmaids come in. And then when she comes in, it's like, wow. And she's taken by her father down the aisle and presented to the groom. That is a little bit like what's going to happen when Jesus returns. That the father is going to take the bride, the church, and lead her down the aisle and present her to the son, the bridegroom, Jesus Christ. And he has already won her affections. He's not hoping that she's going to turn up and looking good. No, she's already made perfect. She readies herself. She's arrayed in her glorious holiness. And the Father presents her to the Son, the bridegroom. In our weddings, then, you have vows. And you swap rings and you make a covenant, you make declarations, you say, all that is mine, I give to you, all that, and vice versa, all that's mine, I give to you. And when you're marrying students, that basically means lots of debt that you're just giving to one another. It's glorious. And you say, and we're in this till death us do part. That's a covenant we're going to make. And it points to the day when Jesus will meet his bride and we say, all that we have, we give to you, which is mess and sin and not a lot and our best efforts and our best attempts. We say, Jesus, all yours. It's all yours. We're yours. And he says, all that is mine, the cosmos, new creation, holiness, relationship to the Father, access to the Trinity, all that is mine, I give to you. And we swap, we're in. And you say, and we promise to do this till death us do part. And Jesus says, the good news is I've already smashed death. So we're in for an eternal relationship with one another. And just like in a marriage, there's a party, there's a celebration, there's a feast. We are going to have a marriage supper with the Lamb. And he will drink of the vine again, which basically means there's going to be an epic party. And then again, in our earthly marriages, the marriage is physically consummated. The couples become one flesh through sexual union. With Jesus, we won't become one flesh, we'll become one spirit. So all of my spirit I'm going to pour into you, and you will have him forevermore. It'll be, you think it's crazy on a Sunday night with Wendy Mann. You wait till we're in glory and the Spirit is given, and we become one in spirit. Not just one in flesh, but one in spirit with God himself. Access to God, relationship with God, fellowship with God, the love and delight of all that is God will be given to us in lifelong covenant. And just like typically the bride takes the groom's surname, we will take his name. Christians, other names that he will give us forevermore. That weddings are choreographed point to that day is coming. And you know, in history, God didn't just look at the world and think, look at all these humans getting married. This is a good analogy. I'll steal that. I could use that to talk about the love of Jesus and his church. No, before anything was made, God knew how he was going to weave this into creation. Every marriage gets to point to that bigger reality. That it's been God's plan right from the beginning, and it's going to be the way that he finishes it. A beautiful marriage, one glorious marriage for all eternity that we get to be a part of. When you know that that's true, it really helps motivate you to work on your own marriage. When you think, I'm not just working on my marriage for me, or for my spouse, or for my kids. I'm working on my marriage for us, because it's a picture that points us to that bigger reality. I'm working on marriage for the sake of the world, because people are far more likely to see our marriages than they are to open a Bible in terms of accessing things of God. But primarily and ultimately, why work on your marriage? Do it for Jesus. Because it speaks of what he has won. In other words, all of those reasons are good reasons. You could work on your marriage for each and every one of them. But I think the most profound reason is to do it for him. And someone once said this, I thought it was quite helpful. Some people take more care of their car than their marriage. I quite like that. Mostly because I don't really take much care of my car, so I felt free to get off the hook on that one. But I think it's true. With your car, you at least get it MOT'd, serviced. If you're really into it, get it out, give it a good wash and polish once a month or something. If you've got a scratch, get it in the garage straight away. Do you put as much care and attention into your marriage as your car? And you can replace car with whatever the thing is that you actually care a lot about. We want to invest in our marriages because of what they point to. For those that are married, this is your lunchtime conversation. How are you going to invest in your marriage? It might be, we've never cracked praying together. We're going to do that. We're going to read the Bible together. We're going to have more time together. We're going to do fun things together. We're going to work on our communication. I don't know what it is. Hopefully you do. Julia and I, at the moment, we're having marriage counselling, which I thought I'd throw in, just in case people think, are you two going to get divorced? No. We're way before there, but just know there's some things we want to work on. We really, really want to work on our marriage. See it as a big priority. What do you need to do to work on yours? Because the call that Jesus gives to married couples is big. The call to love, to forgive, to lay down pride, lay down rights, prefer one another. It's basically a battle for who can be the humblest, who can serve the most, who can get lowest quickest. Which sounds great. I mean, that's out up here. There you go, guys. There's your marriage advice for the day. When you're actually in it, that never seems like a good idea. So I'm going to stand my ground. I'm not going to forgive. I'm not going to lie. No. Which it's just my sin. I'm just, pray for me. Pray for Julia especially. But in marriage, no, the deal is that you love and you forgive and you prefer somebody else's needs rather than your own, which at the coalface is really difficult. How on earth do you do it? How do you love someone when you don't know if they'll love you back? How do you forgive them when you don't know if they'll forgive you back? How do you keep giving yourself when you don't know if it's going to be reciprocal or not? You have to find that strength in Jesus. Because if you come and drink this living water that I am offering you, that's the only way you'll be able to give out in a way that is quite supernatural. You say, God, I need to know that I'm loved so that I can go and love. I need to know that I'm forgiven so I can go and forgive. I need to know that you care for my needs and you will look after me and you will put me first. Then I can go and do it for someone else. And therefore, this is true not just in marriage, but for single people, for all of our relationships. How on earth do you love deeply and sacrificially, or you go above and beyond? You have to receive it from God first. Otherwise, it's impossible. Otherwise, this message is just like, come on, everyone, try harder, be more sacrificial, really give yourselves. It's not a bad thing to say, but how on earth do you sustain it? How do you live a whole life? How do you have a marriage where you celebrate a 50-year anniversary? You need living water. What is the best gift you could give your spouse? Drink deep some living water. What is the best gift, if you're single, you could give your friend? Drink deep living water. We need him. And Jesus says to the woman at the well, I'm the one you've been waiting for. I'm here. I am ready to give it. He says it to every single one of us today. Nobody needs to leave here this morning without receiving this gift. Married, single, divorced, whatever our situation. This is his offer. Living water to quench your thirst in a way that nothing in the world can do it. Nothing else will do. I want to invite the band to come. My real prayer this morning is that we would catch the bigger vision. This whole thing is about Jesus and his church. So if you'd like to stand with me, we're going to focus on him. We're going to worship him. And as we worship, I encourage you, just where you're in need, where you're thirsty, where you need him to come, ask him to come. And I believe he will.